Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Uncle Mad here. It is a Nashville FC, or FC, I'm going back to USL days. Nashville, or even before USL, Nashville fitting jersey to wear for that. Nashville SC match day. So we're here live talking all things boys in gold as they get ready to host FC. That's where I think I was going with that. Cincinnati at Geodis Park later on this evening. I will be there live for the match. We will have a full game day vlog coming out tomorrow, unless something devastating happens where I'm unable to get up and edit in the morning. Who knows? You never know, but should have a match day vlog coming tomorrow. But the match itself happens tonight. The boys in gold on a 3-game winning streak. On the other side, Cincinnati, no result, no wins in their last 3. It's been a tough run for them, but they've had some extenuating circumstances that we'll get into here as we go through the show. Right there, right first thing, we got Nashville SC. Is this the real Nashville SC? No. Hope we get a result today. Excited to watch the game. Yeah, this is a big one. I think the fan base is kind of getting fired up right now, and this is a really good time to have a game like Cincinnati come up on the schedule because they're a team we certainly want to get a result against. They're a team we certainly would like to beat. So kind of riding the momentum we've had to start the season and getting them coming here to Geodis Park, the timing, it's good. Kudos to the MLS schedule makers for kind of lining this up the way they did. But before we get to Cincinnati, I always like to kind of go back, chat what happened last week. I talk about it a little bit on the game day vlogs, but it's always fun to kind of just recap here on the live streams. Last week, big win over Montreal, 3-win at Geodis Park. A lot to like about that game. Montreal, obviously, not a very good team, struggling, bottom of the table, fired their coach after the match. I've seen a lot of people talking about Nashville SC being a coach killer. We've had a bunch of situations like this where a coach has got fired right after playing Nashville SC. And I don't think that's necessarily the best thing in the world because I think you get a coach fired when they lose a game that they feel they shouldn't lose. It's a lot of times the ownership, management, general manager, football director, whoever looks at losing to Nashville SC and goes, we should not be losing to Nashville SC. That was my weird Montreal French accent. Sorry for that. But goes, we got to fire this guy because he lost to Nashville SC. So, but it seems like it happens a lot. Looking at that game, the things that I thought was really encouraging, just beyond getting a win, the X factors that I think are really positive signs for this team is one, I think throughout Nashville SC's history, we've had a bad trend of kind of playing down to competition. So when we had a bad team like Montreal coming to our home stadium, that wasn't a situation where we all, would step on their heads, just really stomp them the way we should. Sometimes we'd squeak out a 0-0 draw, a 1-0 draw. I kind of felt like we were seeing a little bit of that earlier this season when New England came here for the very first game and it was a 0-0 draw. And it was ugh, feels like we should have got a result there. Is this the, same old Nashville? And now we're starting to see some of that stuff kind of fading away, kind of be moving out. We're a inferior team, apologies if any Montreal fans were watching that, but I think you would agree that's what they are right now. Comes to Geodis Park, and we took care of business. We just kind of stomped them out. And the other thing that's encouraging about that stomp out was the first half, they made it difficult. They threw some things at us that kind of stifled us a little bit. They played a lot of man marking, man-to-man defense, which you don't really see that much at high-level soccer. But, if you're trying to just completely neutralize a team that wants to move and interchange the way Nashville SC has been this season, that's a good idea for it. And we adjusted. That's something that I don't know that we've seen a lot of in the history of Nashville SC is halftime adjustments, mid-match adjustments, changes to the tactical approach to, adjust when a team's throwing something at us that's causing us problems. In second half, came out pretty handily, beat Montreal based on that second half performance. So good things we saw there. Taking care of an inferior opponent and being able to tactically adjust and have some flexibility to, adjust when things weren't necessarily going our way from the initial outset. And also, just once again, we keep seeing it this season, whether it was, Matt Cochran and Will Meyer starting the first 2 games or some of the other things, the depth of this Nashville SC team looks like it's just on another level compared to anything we've seen before where, you go into that matchup, you feel like you're feeling pretty comfortable with, the way the lineup's starting to come together. You're going to miss Andy Nahar, who's on international duty. And then suddenly, day of match, we had Ahmad Kassam and Patrick Yazbek struck down with, stomach viruses, which, if you've ever had a stomach virus and you've ever played soccer, those two things just cannot possibly go well together. Shout out Patrick Yazbek. I will give him a big shout out for that match because, I don't know exactly, what the timeline was for him, what his symptoms were, but, he was on the bench as a substitute available to play, but it was either early in the first half or at halftime just was gone, was like, I can't do this. He had to leave, but I shout out him for making the valiant effort to attempt to make himself available. It seems like Kassam maybe got it first, and he was in line to start and then got dropped out. Johnny Perez comes in. Johnny Perez gets a goal, so shout out Johnny Perez for stepping up. But like I said, that's another positive sign from the Montreal match is that Nashville SC has some depth. We have some ability to pull some players out when things don't go our way. We had a guy away at one of our key players to start the season, Eddie Nahar, on international duty. Josh Bauer steps in, gets a goal, looks pretty bright, is a solid defender, does what he does. I would kind of compare Josh Bauer. I had this in my head earlier today. I was listening to a podcast while I was cutting the grass where the 104.5 The Zone's Nashville SC podcast that they do once a month. I was listening to their broadcast and they were talking about Josh Bauer. And I think I kind of acute him to being like a high-level backup quarterback in the NFL where, you have a really good game, you do really well, and you basically earn yourself a contract for life. You're not like a high-level player. You're not going to be like a superstar, but you'll always have a job. You'll always have somebody that wants you. I think Josh Bauer's getting to that range where he's like, you can play center back, you can play right back. You're not going to get a major drop-off. You maybe don't have the ceiling you have with other players, but you're not going to have a huge drop-off if he has to come in your team. And so shout out him for a great performance against Montreal. Our Nashville SC friend in the comment has said it's going to be a tough game stretch, and this is something we talked about last week. Why that Montreal game was so important to get the result there was this next stretch is really, really bad. Said Cindy, I'm pretty sure he means Cincinnati. Cincinnati comes to Geodis Park today. Next weekend, we go to Charlotte, who's off to a really good start this season. Then Real Salt Lake, who's always a tough opponent, comes to Geodis Park. Then we finish the stretch up with a trip to Seattle, who they're kind of in the same boat as Cincinnati right now, where they've kind of not been as good as you would expect, but they also had CONCACAF Champions League. They've had a ton of injuries. They've had some problems. So, still going to be a challenge. And going all the way from Nashville to Seattle for a road trip is obviously going to be a challenge in and of itself. But the fifth game in this stretch, the one that was probably Nashville SC's fans probably looking at going, okay, that's where we kind of even out and come back down. That's not looking as easy either. We follow this 5-game stretch up with Chicago, who has been pretty decent to start the season. They're not the crap Chicago team they have been over the last, 5-6 years, whatever it's been. Greg Berhalter's got the boys playing well. They've got some good players, going out there, getting some things done. They've got one of the top scorers in the MLS. So we'll get to that game when it comes up, but Chicago suddenly is not looking like as easy a matchup on the end of this little 4-game stretch, making it now like maybe a tough 5-game stretch coming up. But going into today's matchup, Nashville SC versus FC Cincinnati at Geodis Park, got the question, score predictions, and we'll certainly get there. But I think you're looking at the situation here. FC Cincinnati, winless in their last 3 matches, not the start to the season most people would have expected from them, but they do have, the kind of catch-all added emphasis of they've been playing in CONCACAF Champions League. They've had a ton of injuries, particularly in their defense, so it's been a little bit of a disruptive season for them. But they're out of CONCACAF Champions League now. They're getting a couple players back. I believe Miles Robinson and I can't pronounce his name. It's like his first name sounds like it's teenage, but I can't pronounce the rest of his name. They both, I believe, will be available today. They weren't listed on the injury report. The only player, unless I missed something, Matt Miazga is out still for them. Kubo, their talented, midfielder that's been there for a while, is out, but they got some really good players. I'm going to mispronounce probably 90% of them. Kiki, KK, Kate, Kater, whatever, the high-price striker they brought in the offseason. He's been coming and hit the ground running really well for them. Evander coming over from Portland. I think, projecting, looking ahead to the sad bummer of a day when Hani Mukhtar leaves Nashville SC, I hope we're able to quickly turn things over and, keep the ball rolling the way. There we go. Dylan jumps in. I'm glad somebody is better than me. Teenage Hadebe. Yeah, that's their designated player center back who's been injured to start the season. I think he's maybe back available today. We'll see. But you know, to have to lose Lucho Acosta, which seemed like it was like some behind the scenes contract drama led to that, and then to just go and get Evander, like one of the other best players at that position in the league, to just replace him is a good way to move forward. So on the sad day in the future where Nashville SC has to say goodbye to Hani Mukhtar, I hope we are as proactive and as efficient in replacing him as FC Cincinnati was with replacing Lucho Acosta. But that kind of leads into where I think the key matchup in the match is today is the midfield. I mean, Nashville SC really completely turned their midfield over this offseason, getting rid of Brian Anunga, who we could see today. He's been starting and playing for FC Cincinnati. I think Nashville SC fans would probably be happy to see him in the lineup based on, the opinion most of us hold of him. But, he's gone. Sean Davis is gone. Anibal Godoy is gone. Adam Sipic, who barely played, is gone. Just a lot of change there. And the players that have come in have hit the ground running and looked really good. Eddie Taxeth, Gaston Brugman put in a good shift last week. Patrick Yazbak, when he came back from injury before he got knocked down by the stomach virus, looked really good in midfield the last couple games. Even the two young players who had to play the first couple matches, Will Meyer and Cochran, both, solid additions, solid depth. And, we got Brian Acosta, who we haven't even seen yet. He remains to be out injured. He's kind of the only non-long-term injury that we're just kind of still watching, waiting for when is he going to turn that corner? When is he going to come back? But the midfield has just been so incredible today. It's becoming almost like a borderline, luxury problem where, like, if everybody's fit, if everybody's available, who do we select? Who do we choose today? Seems like the stomach virus issue is gone. So we should have, unless there was like a late training injury between when the injury report was released yesterday and today, we should have our full allotment of players available. And Nashville SC says here, Eddie is so God. I mean, and he corrected himself and he said good, but you might have been right on the first one, because Eddie Taxeth has been my favorite player of the season so far. I think, you can put him, you can put Kassam, you can put Andy Nahar in the conversation of who's been the biggest impact players for Nashville SC. But I mean, Eddie playing every match, covering every blade of grass, just being the workhorse grinder in the midfield has been incredible. But if everybody's available, if everybody's fit, we start to have like a weird, like I said, luxury problem of selection issues of somebody. You can only start 11, so somebody has to drop out. And we may see a little of that today, because we're going to have, you'd expect Gaston Brugman is pretty much close to full fitness now. Yazbak and Kassam coming back from the stomach issue last week. Taxeth is there, and Wheel's still there. Schaffelberg looked really good for Canada. He's coming back. He seems to be fully fit now. A lot of pretty solid players. Johnny Perez got the start, scored a goal last week. It's like in the Discord chat of, I think, 615 Soccer last week, there was like somebody who was like, should we maybe look to trade Gaston Brugman? It's like, bro, guys, we just now have like really good depth, really good, let's not immediately start pulling it apart because a couple guys can't start or a couple guys might miss a match here and there. So especially looking ahead to this summer, I was thinking about this earlier, like where the Gold Cup's going to play, pull, Andy Nahar, potentially Walker Zimmerman, potentially others out of the team. Keep the depth, keep the players that we have right now. Let's make sure we have all the players available that we can. But like I was kind of leading to, I think the midfield of FC Cincinnati versus the midfield of Nashville SC is going to be kind of a key matchup for us today, because, that's where they can really exploit us if we make a mistake, because it's a two-man midfield versus a three-man midfield. There is a little bit of a mismatch in there, although we do play a more narrow style of play where we have a few extra bodies in the middle that will kind of clog things up still. But, Taxeth, Brugman, Yazbak, whoever it may be, you place a bad pass, you make a bad touch in there, and Evander jumps on it, or their defensive midfielders jump on it and get the ball going the other way in transition. Could be a quick, dangerous spot for Nashville SC right there. Before the Montreal game, Eddie had covered 31 miles in 4 games. That is wild. That is... Dude is running. Dude is making life miserable for the other team, just covering every blade of grass. He's my favorite player this season by far, like so far of the new boys. It's hard to pick because everybody, like, knock on wood, so far has really hit the ground running, but he's been really impressive. I've been really a big fan of Eddie Taxeth so far. So who do we play today? What's the lineup look like? Where do we go? Who comes in? I think Kassam comes back in because it seems like he was in line to still be a starter last week before the stomach bug comes in. The only question, I think we'll be seeing the same lineup you would expect, Nahar, Zimmerman, Maurer, Lovitz, Willis, backline, midfield. I think you keep Tag Seth as a central midfielder. You don't push him back to wing. So it's Yazbak or Brugman as the other central midfielder. And then you got Muil, Kassam, Hani, Surridge. Be really interesting to see what that decision is because, Brugman, high price player, high level, successful player in the MLS. Yazbak has looked very good in his short time in Nashville SC. I'd like to see the two of them together and maybe like Tag Seth push back to the wing, but then you got to drop Muil, who's been really good, or Kassam, who's been really good. So, like I said, luxury problems in selection here. It's a big match for Nashville SC because, obviously you get a result against a team that many people think is probably one of the better teams in the East in FC Cincinnati. That would be huge for just the confidence going, building and going forward. FC Cincinnati is kind of almost looking to right the ship, after kind of their kind of up and down start to the season. They're getting some players back from injury. They don't have the schedule congestion from from the CONCACAF Champions Cup as much anymore. So this is a good time if they can come here on the road and get a result and kind of quiet the buzz around Nashville. It's a good result for them. It's a big match for both teams. It was a big match. It's going to be a big match for both teams. I think there's going to be goals because FC Cincinnati, if there's one thing they have not done very well this season, it's defend. And seeing how much more, positive Nashville SC has been in terms of attacking, going and getting goals. Maybe the craziest thing about this season for Nashville SC so far, best start in MLS history, most goals, best goal differential, best points through 5 games, but 7 different goal scorers. And kind of the narrative around Nashville SC for basically the entire history of the club has been, if we can get goal production from anybody other than Hani Mukhtar, we could be special. And now he's only scored 1 goal, and we got 6 other players who have scored goals. So finding goals from all over the team is a huge, bright, positive spot. I think there's goals galore in this game. I think it could be a very, very fun game, a very open game, too, because I think, with the players they have, I think FC Cincinnati's attacking players are going to test us a lot more than really anything we've seen outside of maybe, Philly and New York. So I think there's goals in this game. I think Nashville's riding some confidence, though. Maybe I'm just, got my gold tinted glasses on or something like that. But there was a video going around where, like, in the pregame huddle, Walker Zimmerman's talking to the players, and he says, "It's Hani bobblehead night. When we score a goal, we're doing a Hani bobblehead celebration." Like, for Nashville SC, for the players to have that level of confidence that we were going to score, which has not been a given in Nashville SC's history, that we were going to score goals. I like the confidence. I like the energy. I like the momentum. I like trying to keep building. I like catching Cincinnati where they're kind of still working their way up to what the best version of Cincinnati is going to be at some point this season. I like a 3-2 win for Nashville SC. So you asked earlier, score predictions. That's what I'm going with this match. I'm going 3-2 boys in gold. Get the win, get 3 points, get a good start to this little tough stretch they've got coming up. Excited to go to the match, excited to see what happens. Another question came in here. Was your Hani Mukhtar bobblehead signed? Unfortunately not. I did not luck out to get one of the special ones that were hidden amongst the pack of the signed ones. I believe there were some others that had like some other special things, and then like you got a chance to like go on the field to watch warm-ups and stuff like that if you found like a special ticket in yours. Mine was just, the standard Hani bobblehead, which was very cool. I'm still very appreciative, very glad I got mine. I'm very happy with that. But yeah, unfortunately I did not get one of the special edition ones that were hidden amongst the giveaway last week. The last kind of thing I wanted to kind of hit on this match, and this is a big point of contention, a big talking point that comes up anytime Nashville SC takes on FC Cincinnati, is this a rivalry game? And I can kind of see both sides of it. I'll play a little devil's advocate here and kind of say both sides of it. I think, I understand why FC Cincinnati fans try to say it's not a rivalry, but they almost go so hard in that direction that you're like, you're trying a little too hard, bro. I think you think it is a rivalry if you're trying that hard to say it's not a rivalry. It makes sense from the perspective of obviously Columbus is more of a natural rival for them. It's obviously, you can say we are in the same state. We've been, people that live in Cincinnati probably have been going back and forth with people in Columbus all that time. It makes sense that Cincinnati Columbus would be a more natural rivalry than Nashville and Cincinnati. I also think they want to like say it's not a rivalry, the Cincinnati fans, because just they kind of had the better of the days when we were in USL together, and it was a rivalry. It definitely was a rivalry when we were in USL because we were both like going, toe to toe over who was going to be the team that came, into MLS and hit the ground running. And I think the fact that we came in, you know, didn't necessarily like, obviously we'd like to have a trophy or something like that. They've got a couple of those. But, we came in, made the playoffs, had a good start of the season, had a guy get a league MVP. Meanwhile, they won 3 wooden spoons. So I think there's probably a little bit of that to it. But I think I probably would lean, it's a fun banter rivalry between fans. They travel down here. I mean, you don't travel that much. Yeah, obviously, there's a little bit of like proximity that makes that happen, but you don't talk as much as they do if you don't have a little bit of animosity towards the other team. Like they are maybe, and I think the reason Nashville SD fans probably want it to be a rivalry is because FC Cincinnati is definitely the most fun fan base to banter and poke and prod because they are just the worst. Like nobody searches Twitter for mentions of FC Cincinnati, mentions of their city more than that fan base. Like this is a story I've told probably on the channel many times, but years ago, before I was making videos, I went on a trip to Cincinnati because my wife was out of town and the Braves, I'm a Braves fan, were playing the Reds in Cincinnati. So this weekend she was out of town. I was like, I got nothing to do. I actually know a couple people that live in Cincinnati. I'll go up there for the weekend, watch some Braves games, hang out with some people I know up there, just make a nice little weekend of it while my wife's out of town. So I go up there, get a hotel. This is pretty much, I think, around the first year that the Cincinnati Stadium, TQL Stadium, was open. So it was brand new pretty much. My friend from Cincinnati asked me, hey, where are you staying? What hotel are you staying in? And I was like, I don't really know the neighborhoods or the parts of town and what to call them and stuff like that. And I said, I'm staying right by the soccer stadium because I could see the soccer stadium from a hotel window. And the exact response my friend gave me, my friend who lived in Cincinnati, is a Cincinnati native, said, ooh, that part of town is gross. So I tweeted something to the effect of like, it's weird that FC Cincinnati built their stadium in like a crap part of town or something like that. Didn't mention anybody, didn't tag anybody, didn't even hashtag anything. And I got people blowing me up with comments about how stupid I was. There was a guy who blogs about FC Cincinnati that wrote an entire blog about the stupid Twitter comment I made, which was based on something somebody from Cincinnati told me. So they get a little butthurt about if you talk about them. So they're a fun fan base to mess with. I think that's why a lot of our fan base wants it to be a rivalry, wants to like poke the bear and have fun with them. Like Denzel, like one of the most prominent Nashville SC fans on Twitter, especially. I said this on Twitter this week. I don't know that the teams have a rivalry, but Denzel versus their fans is definitely a rivalry. If you don't know that, follow him on Twitter, find that whole history and thread there. It's been a lot of fun. But like I said earlier, I was listening to the podcast version of the radio show 104.5 that the Zone does covering Nashville SC, and they actually had Alex Mweel on, and they said, hey, have you, as a veteran on the team now, have you talked to any of the new players, caught them up to speed about the rivalry between Nashville and Cincinnati? And he said, well, I don't know. Is it really a rivalry? I didn't really think of it as a rivalry. And like from that perspective, I would totally agree. And Dylan said this in the comments, unpopular opinion. It's not a rivalry. I think rivalries, you got the proximity rivalries. So like them in Columbus, that's going to be a natural thing. We don't have like an in-state one. They're kind of close to us. Atlanta's kind of close to us. So there's a little proximity there. But rivalries are really built, like if you look at like across sports, not just like MLS, real rivalries are built on two things: proximity and competition. We haven't really had in our MLS history like a major, huge competitive match against FC Cincinnati. We've had like, the standard regular season matchups, but we haven't played them in the playoffs. We haven't played them in any kind of other, cup or tournament or other kind of major match. So you don't really have those key, big matches. Like I've gone on with Richard just jumped in the chat. He said, "Hi, Mad. What's up, Richard?" He also views the channel Battered Herons, which is an Inter Miami channel. I've gone on several times with them to, preview matches, talk about stuff like there. And me and one of their co-hosts have kind of contended that there's a borderline budding rivalry between Inter Miami and Nashville SC because we came into the league the same year. There's a little bit of natural competition of who was going to be the better team. And we keep seeming to play them in like big matches. Obviously, League's Cup final, played them in Open Cup at one point, I think, in time, played them in CONCACAF Champions League last year, had a early days, we played them in the playoffs. So we keep having bigger matches with Miami. There's a bit of bitterness that develops there. Last year, we kind of washed that all away because we just sucked so bad that nobody even cared about playing us that much. But that's kind of stuff that develops rivalries. And we really don't have that with Cincinnati. We haven't had like a big, major competitive match with FC Cincinnati. They're fun days. It's fun to get up. It's a little bit more of exciting of a typical game day than, playing Montreal. Apologies to Montreal fans, but I don't think anybody in Nashville SC is getting into Twitter wars with any Montreal fans. But from the player's perspective, from the on-field perspective, there's just not that really like competitive fight for major achievements yet because we haven't come up against them in those type of situations, which once again, I'm going to shout out Dylan. To his point, he said an argument for being rivalry was USL days. Yeah, we were directly competing with them. Like we were two of the better teams in USL during that stretch. I think we even had a couple playoff matches in USL days. So that was more, they didn't have the Columbus thing going on at that point in time. And we were, two teams that were fighting to be at top of USL. So to my point, like I think you need that competitiveness. You need those big matches that mean something to develop a rivalry. There's a reason, like if you look at, the biggest rivalries in like world soccer, Real Madrid, Barcelona, they're not like, I mean, I'm sure they're closer than most of the teams playing in MLS, but it's not like they're not rivals because they're, neighbors or the proximity. They're rivals because they are, the two top teams that every year in and year out, for the most part, they're going to be the teams that are going to be fighting for the big trophies in Spain. Similarly, United and Liverpool, United and, Arsenal during the early 90s, United and Chelsea during like the 2000s. The teams that are really fighting for the big stuff, that's what the rivalries were built on. And Richard's like got, the example of the proximity, Toronto versus Montreal, great rivalry. Like it's one where like if the fans get engaged, if you're playing them consistently, if there's a little bit of home turf, dominance on the line, these type of things happen because like, especially like if like the cities have a rivalry like built in. I'm sure like Toronto and Montreal probably have gone back and forth over the years, just outside of sports of like, what's the best city, between the two. Nashville, for a pretty small time, we've only recently started to blow up and get to, develop as a city. There's not a whole lot of times where we were like fighting city, like Memphis. Do we fight with Memphis? Do we fight with Knoxville? I don't know. When you don't have those like, direct, competition things, you got to get it from the competitive edge on the field. And like MLS is so big and vast and there's too many teams make the playoffs. So there's not as much of competitiveness in the regular season. Whereas like the Titans, we have a rivalry with the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Texans, because those are the three teams that we are directly in competition with to make the playoffs. MLS, you got 12 other teams, 13, 14, whatever it is, other teams, and only like 4 or 5 of you aren't going to make the playoffs. So you kind of lose a little bit of the edge there. So I would kind of probably lean with what Dylan said earlier, that it's not a rivalry, but, it is one where it's a lot of fun because there's a ton of banter between the two fan bases. So maybe not a rivalry on the field, but a nice little fun off the field banter fest is what I would probably describe it as. And I don't think Nashville SC really has firmly established a rival yet. Like I said, we're getting a little budding thing going with Montreal because we kept running into them in like big matches, or not Montreal, Inter Miami, because we kept running into them in like big matches. But then some of that got derailed by sucking so bad last year. We do have the Southern Championship Belt series that we do every year with Charlotte, Atlanta, and DC United. I still to this day do not understand why DC United is in the Southern Championship Belt series. Never has made sense to me, never will. But we got a little bit. We're growing. We're developing. This is year 6 for Nashville SC. And, kind of going back to the USL days, only 2 years before that. So we don't have to rush everything. We don't have to force things. We don't have to push things through that aren't necessarily like, really there. We can let it play out. I do think there is something there between the fan bases, because like I said, you don't name search, you don't talk crap, you don't go all so hard on Twitter the way FC Cincinnati fans tend to do if you don't have a little bit of a bitterness, a little bit of anger, a little bit of animosity about something, what have you, whatever it be. There'll be a bunch of them at the game today. They always travel well for this game. We always travel well for their game, so it should be fun. I always thought like Atlanta should be our rival, but like we came in so late, they kind of already had a thing established between them and Orlando a little bit, and then they haven't been very good since we've been in the league either. So maybe like if we can both be good at the same time, that could become a fun little thing with us in Atlanta. But I don't know. It's just always a fun topic of debate whenever we take on FC Cincinnati. Are they a rival? I think I wouldn't say we're rivals. There's a word I can't place. There's a good competitive spirit, especially with the fan base. Maybe not so much on the field with the players, but the fan base. There's definitely a good level of spirit of competition between Cincinnati and Nashville SC on the fan base side of things. Dylan says, would you consider Orlando a rival? A few playoff games against each other and normally some on-field banter. Yeah, I put them in the same boat as Miami, where there was like some important games we had with them, over the years. Always seemed to be a little bit extra spice, a little bit extra competitiveness to those matches. It's hard. I feel like a lot of the stuff we were developing got derailed by sucking so bad last year and so many of the games just like not meaning anything. But Orlando, I would definitely say, they're kind of in that same boat, that same ballpark of Miami, where we've had some really good competitive matches with them. There's been some definitely a little heat. There's games where like our fan base was just livid because they were just like the worst divers, the worst time wasters. They were a very frustrating team to play. I think most teams probably feel that way about Orlando, so we might not be alone in that regard, but I definitely feel like there is something to that, where it's kind of the same boat as Miami, where we've had some really competitive matches with them that kind of meant something. And anybody who's followed my channel for stuff that I do outside of Nashville SC, I'm a huge fan of Disney World. So if Orlando becomes our chief rival and I have to go down there, a couple times a year for matches, you ain't going to get too much of a fight from me on that one. I will definitely embrace Orlando being our chief rival if that's how things start to develop and play out over the next few years. So you won't get much of a fight back on me from that one. But I didn't really have much else. It was good stuff coming in the chat, good comments there that I wanted to talk about with this one. It's still early days in the season. We're still kind of learning. Like, I think if I have a mantra, if I have a thing I'm trying to hold on to this season, it's, pump the brakes, don't get too ahead of yourself, because it's been really good. It's been really exciting, but, we've beat two of the worst teams in the league, but we beat them handily. Like I said, that's something Nashville SC didn't always do in the past. Good result on the road against Philadelphia, so there's definitely signs that this team is different than past Nashville SC fans, but I'm trying to pump the brakes. I'm not trying not to get too ahead of myself and be like, go ahead, put the name on the trophy and give us the cup type stuff. This next stretch is going to be a really big test, a really good indicator of what we've got. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited. I'll be heading out, in the next hour or so, making my way down to the area around Geodis Park to meet up with some friends, hang out, do a little pregame activities, get ready for the match itself. It's going to be a fun day. It's going to be a fun day of soccer. A little bit of a perfect weather here in Nashville today. It's like the perfect temperature. Might get a little spits of rain here and there, but nothing too severe or heavy. It's going to be a great day. I'm excited for it. Hope all you guys are excited for it. Hope it goes Nashville SC's way. Like I said, my official score prediction for the match is 3-2 Nashville SC. Fingers crossed that we get a little bit of result there. It's also a Nashville Hot Chicken. They dropped like some really cool merch for Nashville Hot Chicken Day, which is tomorrow. So spoiler alert for what the national day on the channel is going to be tomorrow. It's going to be National Nashville Hot Chicken Day. Cool stuff. I pre-ordered the t-shirt. I pre-ordered the pin. I like the scarf we got last year better, which last year was crazy. I don't know, like, if anybody watched that video. The scarf, like, we went over, got it early because, like, I had some friends that lived right by the stadium. We walked over as soon as the team store opened, like, before the match, bought the scarf. By the time the match actually started, I think the scarves were all sold out. My buddy, like, some dude just randomly walked up to us at the match and paid him $300 to buy his Nashville Hot Chicken scarf. And then like 2 weeks later, they restocked and had all the scarves back in the store. I don't like the scarf they put out this year as much as I did last year, so I'm going to stick with last year's scarf. But I did buy the t-shirt, did buy the Nashville Hot Chicken pin, so those are two cool things. I got a koozie. Haven't seen what it looks like yet, but I'm not a drinker, so I don't really need a koozie. But, just to have the item, I might buy it. Who knows? But I think Nashville SC is doing a wise thing from a, business standpoint, not from a fan standpoint, where instead of like doing a big drop of all the cool merch at the start of the season, they seem to be slowly rolling out stuff. Like, there's also like a really cool hockey jersey that they just put out, which I'm like, dang, I would have bought this like 3 weeks ago when then there was still a little bit of cold here in Nashville and worn this hockey jersey to a game. But I think they're like dropping things slowly. Like, there's one of the big news things that's kind of bouncing around with Nashville SC is earlier this week, Footy Headlines, who's pretty, spot on jersey leaks, stuff like that, said Nashville was going to be one of 12 teams that was going to get a third jersey for the 2025 season. Reported it was going to be chalk white, which makes sense, the alternative, a color we haven't used before, white. I don't know how much flair, especially you do that, but it's almost definitely something like, if it's not just a complete bland white jersey, that I'll probably end up buying, since I didn't buy the other jersey this year. But then it came out like today or yesterday that now they've come back and said MLS has switched plans and they're going to go ahead and do 20. All teams are going to get a third jersey this season, which originally they said the third jerseys were going to drop April 4th. But now that every team is going to get one, they've pushed it back to June. So that'll be something that'll be coming up in a couple months that we'll probably be looking at to buy. So slow rollout of cool merch as opposed to dropping everything right at the start of the season is going to trick us Nashville fans into continuing to buy stuff, as opposed to if we just like picked out a handful of things we liked at the start of the season. But smart marketing, smart job by them. But I got my Sounds hot chicken hat on, so I'll be wearing that to the match today for the hot chicken celebrations. May have to get myself some hot chicken while we're at the game today. We'll see. You'll find out exactly what I do at the match today if you're subscribed to the channel and turn the bell on for notifications that you see my match day vlog when it comes out. Dylan, who was in the chat, I'll give him a quick little shout out here too. He does match day vlogs as well. He had a really good one from last week. He does a good job of kind of like getting interactive with other fans, getting their opinions, getting their takes. He does a much better job of that. Me, my vlogs, it's mostly my face and just like game stuff. Like I don't do as good a job as like interacting with the masses. So check out Dylan's channel. He's got some good stuff over there. I'm sure he'll have some good vlogs coming up from some matches upcoming. But until next time, enjoy your life, enjoy your bagels. Come on, you boys in gold.